When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Couch. User: Colummoust8. Posted June 18th, 1996.
When I moved out of my folks' house last year, I had almost nothing in the way of furniture. My first night in the apartment was spent on a mattress on the floor because my parents wanted to keep the old box spring for guests. Well, I guess they felt weird about that because 2 days later, my stepdad Walt showed up in our neighbor's truck hauling the old sofa we used to keep in the basement. It was surprisingly nice, sculpted, dark wood, and thick cushions, and you'd think it was a great gift unless you already knew, like I did, that it was haunted. Walt had always told us he'd found it in a downtown Columbus back alley in the 70s. It was the first piece of furniture he restored himself, so he was attached to it and brought it when we combined households. I remember him telling us in an offhand manner that it was haunted by a mean old bum. We thought he was messing with us, so we wouldn't jump on it or something. Then one night when I was 15, I fell asleep on it while watching TV. What woke me was the feeling of having my hair pulled hard. And it continued for a few seconds while I struggled to get out from under the blanket. My mom and Walt said it had been a dream, but I was pretty steamed up and told them to try it if they didn't believe. They laughed at me, but also elected not to sleep on the couch. My sister Sarah was next, and it was her who gave it the name Garble Man. It happened while she had some friends at our place for a sleepover down in the basement. The girls were talking, playing games, or whatever it is girls do at a sleepover when they all say something was suddenly standing behind the couch. Sarah says it looked like the outline of a man, but fuzzy as if it was made of TV static. The thing didn't move, but made strange, garbled sounds that scared the life out of them. Sarah said it was like the thing was trying to speak to them. Well, the girls all called their parents, begging to go home, and that was the end of my sister's basement sleepovers. As my mother got older, she got more into spiritual stuff and strange things. A year or two before I moved out, she finally decided to sleep on the couch in the basement, and she too met Garble Man. She says 2 hands bunched into fists were trying to push her off. She ran upstairs and slept in her own bed. It's not exactly Candyman level stuff, but it was enough to put her off the spirituality kick for a while. Knowing all of this, you can imagine I wasn't sure how to take Walt's gift, but a couch is a couch, and so I called a couple buddies to help me load it up into the apartment. It's been here ever since, so maybe a year now, and I've only made the mistake of sleeping on it once when I passed out watching Conan after work. Garble Man didn't make a visual appearance, but he gave my hair a good tug and ruined my experience of falling asleep to late-night TV. Now what I do is fall asleep watching TV on the floor, leaning against the couch, and it must be acceptable to him because he ain't given me trouble since. My cats, Bob and Doug, who hate each other, agree on one thing. The couch is a no-go zone. They'll sleep on my lap on the floor, they'll run around it, but they never set a single paw on it. Coincidentally, or maybe not, none of my buddies ever asked to crash at my place, and if someone needs to crash after a party, they pull the cushions off and use them to sleep on the floor. None of them know the couch's history, and when I ask them why they're on the ground, they just say they felt like it. I'm debating telling them, but kind of enjoy having the private joke to myself. Like Walt says, sometimes it's the little things. We haven't had any confrontations since the whole late-night TV incident, even though my buddies have accidentally spilled a few drinks on the sofa, and I like to think we've reached a kind of equilibrium. The way I figure it is, I'm content to have a dead bum sleeping in my living room, as long as he doesn't make any audible noises, manifest, or touch anything.
Subject, Showtime. User, CinemaGuy78RP. Posted April 25, 1994.
I'm a movie guy, by which I mean I love movies. Watching them, talking about them, generally just being around them. Over the years, I've worked at a few of the theaters around Rochester, including some of the old classics like The Waring and The Coronet. I also worked at the Lyle, both before and after they started showing dirty movies to make ends meet. Boy, you better believe me when I say I have seen some stuff. Still, all the weirdos I used to meet at the Lyle and all the second-run horror flicks I used to watch at the Coronet are nothing compared to what happened on one of my last nights at the Stone Ridge Plaza. The Stone Ridge closed about 8 months ago, and it broke my heart. Not because it was particularly unique, because it wasn't, but because I worked with a good crew. I actually got to be a manager for about a year before they closed the doors, which was a first for me. Even though it was a triplex, the Stony was a low-budget affair. All we had for security was a baby monitor and a single cheap CCTV camera in the lobby. Most nights, it was just me and a projectionist working, so we had to divide up ticket and concession sales duties as best as we could before they went up to the booth. When the screenings were over, I'd make sure everyone got out, then go up to the office to count cash. The night this story happened, I was working with Tony, and we were showing I Know What You Did Last Summer, Kiss the Girls, and that Kevin Kline comedy In and Out, which is a scream. So if you haven't seen it, go rent it as soon as you can. And I mention that one specifically because, given what I'm about to tell you, you might think I was unduly influenced by the house playing a full slate of creepy movies. It was a busy night, with the last showing of Summer around midnight. Once everyone had skedaddled, it was 2 a.m. or thereabouts, and I hoofed it upstairs to get everything done so we could go home. I was midway through tallying up the receipts when I remembered I'd forgotten to count the stock in the concession stands. Thankfully, Tony was already on the lobby cam, standing behind register 1, so I buzzed him on the airphone and asked him to count the candy. I knew right away something was up because Tony is a high-energy guy even at that time of the night, but when I called down to him over the radio, he didn't move. He just kept staring at the floor. His face turned slightly away from me. I tried again and still got nothing. By this point, I was kind of annoyed because I almost never asked him to do anything outside the projection booth, and it was late, and the longer he spent staring into the middle distance, the longer it'd take us to get home. So I tried him one more time, giving him a little bit of tone, if you get my meaning. And the sharp tone got a response out of him. He looked up and toward the camera, then back at the floor. The quality of that closed caption camera was absolutely abysmal, so I couldn't really make out the look on his face, but his body language was definitely off. Can't even quite describe it, but it's kind of like he was a marionette whose strings had been cut. He was just kind of standing there, all slumped over. Obviously, this was getting me nowhere, so I finished counting cash, locked everything up, and took one final look at the CCTV before heading downstairs. Tony was still there, doing his weekend at Bernie's routine, and I was preparing a grouchy manager speech. Problem is, when I got downstairs, which took me seconds, he was gone. I tried calling his name. Nada. So I figured he'd taken off to avoid having me chew him out, and fair enough, I'd have done the same. It took me a few minutes to count the stock and close house, after which I started to kill the lights. As I did, I heard Tony yelling that he was still up in the booth. I jogged up there to give him the gears. When I pushed open the door of the booth, Tony was rubbing his eyes. He apologized, said he'd fallen asleep during the final reel and had only just woken up. I stared at him long enough he got uncomfortable and asked me what my deal was. I sputtered for a second and then said he couldn't have been asleep. I saw him on the lobby cam a minute ago. Told him he'd been standing around the register for 10 minutes, looking like the living dead. Tony went pale. He very quickly threw on his old bomber jacket, pushed past me, breaking into a trot the second he was out of the projection booth. Never being slow to catch a hint, I ran after him, killing the house lights along the way. I had to practically beg him to stay with me long enough to lock up the front doors. Afterward, we sat in Tony's van smoking a J. It took a while, but he finally said what we'd both been thinking. If that wasn't me in the lobby, man, who was it? And why did it want to look like me? I still don't have an answer.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.